morning.
Good morning.
This is week number 3 of 4. Tell you about our trip. So the first week, yes, we talked about how this trip came about and a little bit of the background. And last week, Patty and Joel did a great talk about some of the social issues and what mission is and what it can look like. And then today, we're going to have Betsy and Tori talk about the gender issues, which were a big part of UBL and a big part of what we were, what they shared with us. So that's what we'll do today. And next week will be the last week where we're going to talk about what is the future and share and plan, hopefully, together. So take it away.
Thank you, Bev. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Good morning. I'd like for you to meet a couple of the outstanding women who presented talks when we were staying there. And the first woman I'd like to introduce you to is Mia Umania. She talked with us. Let me follow my notes instead of just making this up. The first woman I want to introduce you is Mia Umania, who was a 2023 International Peacemaker and traveled within the U.S. with Carla Cole, who you were introduced to the last couple of weeks, who was also a mission co-worker in Costa Rica working at the UBL. Mia was a student at the UBL and studied theology, and she is a pastor and activist. As a trauma counselor, she works within the indigenous community in Costa Rica in the territory of Cabagra with the people of Chinaquicha. Chinaquicha is a very important indigenous territory right now because they have been struggling to recover the land that was stolen from them. 40 years ago, they were thrown off their land, but the new generation has decided to recover their land, and they have become very well organized. Doris Rios is a leader in the community. We didn't meet her, but she is a leader in the community. Their previous leader was murdered 5 years ago, and after his death, the community reorganized, and Doris emerged with other women to lead. As land was recovered, water was restored, monoculture was abandoned. The community has collective trauma, and Mia works with both men and women, teaching them self-care and working to empower women to be leaders in their families and communities. And as a trauma counselor, Mia has worked with many cases of violence against women and helping the women who have been abused and teaching them to learn to read and write. She works with other organizations to bring sewing machines so women can make backpacks and clothing they sell. They bring school supplies for each child at the beginning of the school year. Mia organizes Christmas gifts for the children. She calls her theology the theology of the cooking stove because she often works in their kitchen around tables and food where intimate conversations happen as women share their experiences and they worship outdoors. The men are involved and interested in accompanying their mothers and wives, but it's mostly the women. She travels 5 hours by bus from one community to another, doing Bible studies and working with art with the children and youth and doing workshops on ecology. She walks many miles on unpaved roads and fields and often sleeps in a hammock or on the ground to reach the people she serves. Miss Umana says that in her work, there are 2 constants: violence against women and earth care. She asks, what can we do on our small spaces of ground on which we live and work? She told us that she is a very different person because of the UBL. The acceptance she feels when she goes into the indigenous communities is because of the theology she learned at UBL, not to bring a colonizing mentality. When they sit around the table in the kitchen as equals, they are able to share a common faith because of the training she received at UBL. She also said that the church is beyond the walls of the building. So when we must be out and involved to see the face of Christ in all we do. So she is a very important person in the community, working with the women, and she works with the men as well. That was a quick talk on her, but mine are all quick. The next amazing woman I want you to meet is Karen Mamani. And I'm going to we're going to be talking about a Bible study sort of that she did with us. So I'm going to pass out these Bible verses to 7 people that would be able to read them. You get a nice one. You don't get a choice. I'm just going to put and Terry, please. Karen. Thank you. That's why we need more people here, but I didn't have enough people to read the Bible verses. You each have a number. When I read your number, I'll ask you to read it. She gave us a talk on Exodus, a story that I know you're familiar with. She is a feminist and a student at UBL, and she did a Bible study with us. She taught us about the women in Exodus doing quiet, intentional disobedience. So I'm going to try and do a Bible study with all of you using her presentation as my guide. We're going to study Exodus 1, 5 through 22, and 2, 1 through 10. Okay, could number 1 read your verse, please?
The descendants of Jacob numbered 70 in all. Joseph was already in Egypt. Now Joseph and all his brothers and all that generation died. But the Israelites were exceedingly fruitful. They multiplied greatly, increased in numbers, and became so numerous that the land was filled with them. Then a new king, to whom Joseph meant nothing, came to power in Egypt. Look, he said to his people, the Israelites have become far too numerous for us. Come, we must deal shrewdly with them, or they will become even more numerous, and if war breaks out, will join our enemies, fight against us, and leave the country.
So this is sort of the background information. The Israelites becoming too numerous for the new king of Egypt, so something had to be done, and this is where the story begins. And we have someone read the second verse, number 2.
This is 11 to 16.
Nice and loud, please.
Okay. So they put she's a philosophy. So they put slave masters over them to oppress them with forced labor. And they built Pithom and Ramses as store cities for Pharaoh. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and spread. So the Egyptians came to dread these Israelites and worked them ruthlessly. They made their lives bitter with harsh labor and brick and mortar and with all kinds of work in the fields. In all their harsh labor, the Egyptians worked them ruthlessly. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, whose names were Shiphrah, thank you, and Puah, when you are helping, see how smart she is? When you are helping with the Hebrew women during childbirth on the delivery stool, if you see the baby is a boy, kill him. But if it's a girl, let her live.
So now we know the king's plan. Kill the baby boys so they cannot make any more Israelites. I guess he figured without the boys, there'd be no sperm, and we couldn't make any more babies, and that would get everything taken care of. But now we're coming to the quiet, intentional disobedience. Number 3, please.
The midwives, however, feared God and did not do what the king of Egypt had told them to do. They let the boys live. Then the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and asked them, "Why have you done this? Why have you let the boys live?" The midwives answered Pharaoh, "Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. They are vigorous and give birth before the midwives arrive. Clever. So God was kind to the midwives, and the people increased and became more numerous. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families of their own.
Thank you. So the midwives did not do what the king had ordered them to do, and they lied to him, making up a story, saying, oh, they're so vigorous, they have their babies before we even arrive. So we can't do that. I'm so sorry. So this is the first act of quiet, intentional disobedience. They disobeyed the king. But this now sort of gently, well, we can't do that because we aren't there during the birth. So, can someone read number 4, please?
Pharaoh gave the order to all his people. Every Hebrew boy that is born you must throw into the Nile. And let every girl live.
There you go. So the Pharaoh decided to make it an official order. So it was 4. Okay. Can someone read 5, please?
Now a man of the tribe of Levi married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. Then she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. His sisters stood at a distance to see what would happen.
This is the second act of quiet, intentional disobedience by a woman. When she decides to keep her baby, but she knows she has to hide her baby, so she puts the baby in a little basket in the Nile. We kind of know the next one, but we want to have someone read number 6 for us, please.
Then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her female slave to get it. She opened it and saw the baby. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. This is one of the Hebrew babies, she said.
So right away, she knows she's disobeying the order because she knows there aren't supposed to be any Hebrew babies living. So this is the third act of quiet, intentional disobedience. When she finds the baby in the reeds, and knowing that it's a Hebrew baby, took the baby to save him, which is a public challenge to her father's rule. And this was kind of scary, but she did it anyway because she knew the right thing to do. Can I have someone read number 7, please?
Then his sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you? Yes, go, she answered. So the girl went and got the baby's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you. So the woman took the baby and nursed him. When the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, saying, I drew him out of the water.
So this is the fourth act of quiet, intentional disobedience. When the baby's sister asked the Pharaoh's daughter she would like for her to get a Hebrew woman, which was the baby's mother, to nurse him, and the mother took the baby and nursed him. And then the Pharaoh's daughter took the older baby back, named him, and took him as her son. And she named him Moses. And as the story continues on and you learn more about Moses, you find that Moses has inherited from his adoptive mother the ability to publicly stand up to injustice. And I thought this was an interesting and different way to look at the story of Moses and the baby, talking about the disobedience that these women did. It was quiet and intentional, but they did it. They didn't get in trouble. Everything happened, and then Moses ended up in the court anyway. So that's my talk. The women were very, very, very good at telling us what they wanted us to know, taking care of the women, and then this Karen taught us, I don't think they're taking one, no, this is the picture. She taught us about how to stand up to injustice. And that was very important. So thank you very much. Now we have, Tori is going to. Thank you. And you're another very important woman in Costa Rica. Tori? Tori's getting a little sore throat, so listen carefully.
Yeah, I'm gonna try not to be too gross up here with what it is that I have. So yeah. Long-term effects of our trip worked out to be that many of you know my father passed on the 7th. Joel came to calling hours in Coshocton, Ohio, and the remainder of the team came to the service itself. We really did bond. I always liked these people, but it feels a lot deeper now. So I want to tell you a little bit more about UBL. You've heard some things about UBL. Their rector, who is kind of like the president at OSU where I met, she runs the place. And you can get lots of great information on her. Here, I'm just, because it's tiny, I'm going to read to you about Elizabeth Cook Steike, I believe is how she pronounces her last name, is the rector and professor of Hebrew Bible at the Latin American Biblical University. She holds a PhD in theology and religion from the University of Exeter in the UK and a master's in biblical studies from Latin American Biblical University in Costa Rica. Her interests include feminist and gender-critical approaches to the Hebrew Bible, especially as relevant to gender issues, gender justice. Her book on intermarriage and masculinities in the book of Ezra is forthcoming. Sounds kind of interesting to me. I don't know that Ed Jennings was president of OSU, did a whole lot of teaching when I was there. He pretty much focused on being the face of OSU. She's got a much bigger job than that. Most of the fundraising that happens for UBL happens because Elizabeth has a great network of contacts. She joined us for lunch on our first full day in Costa Rica and shared that UBL has a long history of supporting women in ministry and higher ed, and that gender studies are embedded in the UBL curriculum. So I don't think they offer specific coursework, it's just an assumption. You know, God made gender, all genders are what they are. And that's just a part of the philosophy of the university. Then, this is Carla Cole, Reverend Dr. Carla Cole, and her husband, Javier. Carla was kind of responsible for the organization of the trip, making sure that we had enough rooms and organizing and contacting all of the speakers who we got to hear, and a lot of our activities that we participated in coordination with Mark. I had the opportunity to speak with Tracy Keenan about Carla, and she had actually heard Carla speak and appreciated what she had to say. So that was a neat connection for comment person. Incidentally, Javier is Nicaraguan. Also, Jane Dent, who is married to Mark, is Nicaraguan. We got to learn some things about Nicaraguan politics because of their involvement. Oh, Carl also served as our translator during much of our visit. And I'll just point out that Costa Rica passed their marriage equality legislation in May of 2020. I think a lot of LGBTQIA plus folks are really concerned about the future of marriage equality in this country presently. Then the other group and presentation that I'd like to talk to you about is called Casa Mit. And I especially love that because there's much about Casament that is the same as Hatch Court. This is Carol Ma, and she sort of developed the program. She had a difficult childhood and for a long time lived on the street. More currently, she's completed a theology degree and she ministers to the women of Casament. She has 2 daughters. She is married to what she says now is a really nice man. And her daughters are seeking higher education. Gretel and Marta are 2 people who, if you're familiar with Catch Court, you know that many of the women who complete the program go on to support other women who are part of the program. And this describes Gretel and Marta. So, yeah, this is kind of how the women described their program. A critical difference between Casament and Catch Court is that in Catch Court, women are adjudicated into the program. It's a special docket, and you can plead into Catch Court and become a part of that umbrella of services. Casament is not adjudicated. Carol offers that ministry of presence. She goes to the area, the Zonakapa, which is where a lot of the women who work as sex workers do their work, offers coffee, friendship, time to talk, a great listening ear. And she, as well as Gretel and Marta, repeated many times throughout our talk, God loves us exactly as we are. We don't ever have to wait or get better or do anything for God to love us. God just does, which I think, has been a message in this church for a good long time. There is psychotherapy, art therapy, job training, and just whatever else they can get some people to donate and do. These books were compiled, they are the women's stories, compiled by a community member. And so there is some pictures of some art therapy. The women were encouraged to write their stories. It was a therapeutic activity as well as a way to help others understand the work at Casament. They have a really great website, and depending on how your computer is set up, they wrote it in Spanish, but up here you can toggle it so that you can see English. It's kind of cool. So yeah, and you can just click through that and scroll through that. And as I looked at the pictures, the women made me think so much of women I've met through Catch Court. I just think they did a great job with the website. Pictures are worth 1,000 words. So I'm going to show you some of them. This is kind of their slogan, which I believe came from the feminist writer Audre Lorde. Some of you may have read her. Not a new writer. Audre Lorde was writing for women's studies classes at OSU back in 1980s. And then talking about some of the specific forms of support that are offered. Starting your own business. And in the tiny print here, encouraging the development of work-related skills for job placement or the promotion of entrepreneurial ventures that contribute to self-sufficiency. I believe Carol is also a graduate of UBL and has a theology degree. She is a pastor. And so you can see here some of the major goals for CASAMET are a comprehensive care center specializing in supporting women, temporary stay homes, and permanent stay homes. Some years ago, just a few years ago, Stephanie Casey Pierce led a book study, and we were fortunate to be able to learn about the concept of housing first. So much of our housing is offered only to people who are already sober, only to people who are who have already resolved some of their issues. Housing first is an idea that says, if we get you housed safely, then you're in a much better position to get into recovery, those kinds of things. Housing is a thing everywhere you look, every country, every group. And I believe that is everything that I brought for you. I'm just going to point out to you that the website for CASAMET, because it really is cool and you can get a lot of your questions answered, is here. It looks like also that we have the full team here. And because my voice sounds like it does, it actually kind of itches and hurts a little bit, I'm going to stop. We are very open and available to answer any questions or hear just statements and impressions that you, some of your takeaways from what you've heard so far at this time. So thanks for listening to us. So you have a team, if you want to come up, maybe there are specific questions they'd like to ask specific ones of us.
So I'm curious, the name CASAMET, what is it? Does it have a meaning?
Well, Casa's house. I'm not sure. Let's toggle and see if we can see the translation anywhere.
That's true.
Maybe it's an about us. I don't know. Did any of the troop goers know that we were told? I don't know how they picked that
It's
name
just,
from.
it's unusual.
Yeah. It's the mid part.
Happy sounds.
I don't know. Sounds good. No, sorry. First question, answers. It's a nice logo though. Mm-hmm. Anybody else want to share a takeaway or formulate a question that they'd like to ask anybody in the group?
One thing I'll share about the CASAMET book that I found really moving was that the person who put it together is a nationally known author in Costa Rica, and that's how they work. They have these projects they put together year by year that the women who are in the program can collaborate on and find a way to use their voice and their story for healing. And so when this book was launched and published, it was a big to-do at this, was it the museum, right?
Museum.
In San Jose. And which would cost like, thousands and thousands to reserve, but of course they got it for free because of the cost and all of that. But the reason they wanted to hold it at that location was because that is the red light district. So what Carol shared with us is that they wanted to have it there so that these women who had had so much of their story in that geography dominated by sadness and by a way of life they want to be free from, now they can come into that same space as published authors. Right? So, part of the reason they do these events, and they were in our project the following year, they're working on a movie right now. And part of that, of course, is to raise awareness, raise funds, all of that. But just as much is so that the women whose stories are being told here can occupy spaces where they can say, I'm now an author, I am an artist, and do that and claim those new identities in the various spaces that had been ones they wanted to be free from. So I found that very, very brilliant and moving in the design of this book.
There was a famous, and she's a beautiful woman. They showed us a picture, I don't know, a famous Costa Rican actress who got behind the program and she found the author. And then she also found an artist. So the following year, we have a little pamphlet. I didn't bring mine, but they had an art exhibit. And many of the women made a poster type picture of their life, how they viewed their life. And they had a public art exhibit, once again, in a place they would never have been able to afford. But they were going out and finding people who are primo in their art world to give these women a way to express and to get out. So during the psychiatric help that they were getting, this is part of that, I'm letting people know what my life looked like and sharing it that way. And not necessarily standing up and talking, but, here's my artwork. And that was amazing.
To Susan and Joel's points, there is a trailer for the movie to get us excited about the movie. It's only 35 seconds long. So I'm gonna go ahead and play a 35-second thing. It's in Spanish, but what's written up there is, she has cold, hunger, dreams. And that would translate better as she is cold, she is hungry, she has dreams. I got to practice my Spanish. It's great. Health therapy, apprenticeships, opportunities, sisterhood, women accompanying women with respect for all. They do use art therapy and many creative expressions to kind of process all that's happened to them.
I think one of the things that makes this group stand out is there were other groups, but they insist you be clean. They insist that you give up your life on the street completely. You can't, and this place says, when you're ready, we're here for you. And at the end, the speaker sat and looked at the two women that had come with her. And what did she read a scripture or a prayer?
She read a scripture, and it's the one that, it's the Luke passage, right? And it's Jesus in the synagogue. She's quoting Isaiah, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. So the passage reads in Isaiah, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, and has anointed me to preach good news to the poor, recovering sight to the blind, prisoners might go free. Jesus used that same passage in Luke 4 when he's inaugurating his ministry. It's his first sermon. They tried to push him off the cliff. So when Carol was reading it to Gretel and Marta, we got to witness it, but she was saying it to Gretel and to Marta, not to us. But the language wasn't the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, it was on you. She changed that pronoun to you. The Spirit of the Lord is upon you, and God's anointing you to preach good news to the poor, recovering sight to the blind. Very, very emotional, emotive moment that I felt like we got to bear witness to. It's like, reading if you can on this really powerful moment between these three beautiful women.
Oh, yeah.
She and to these two women, ignoring the rest of us. This is the message to you.
Yeah.
And when you hear, if they do that, and that is their mission, they're saying it to everybody. And they go into shelters and just say, when you're ready, this is who we are, this is where we are, with that message. It was so powerful, and just the presence and allowing of these people to understand their love. And that's what those two women, Fred and Martha, said to us. Finally, someone said, we didn't believe it, that we were worthy, we were loved. So,
one of the women had said she had lived on the street, sleeping in, not in any shelter for 40 years. Because she wasn't welcome in any of them. And she had met our speaker earlier, but she didn't believe her. And the speaker had gone and tried to work after a college degree, and she wasn't, except she went to UBL and learned a whole new way of talking and dealing with people, and went back and started and just sat and listened to people instead of, talking to them, letting them talk to her, and her comforting them that way. And she said that was what she learned at UBL, was a whole different way to interact with people, and with the theology that she hadn't had before when I think she had a degree in social work or something like that, and thought I'll just go down and do this. And she said they wouldn't have anything to do with her. And the woman whose daughters, they had the two daughters, one of them, the oldest one, is now in medical school at the University of Missouri.
That's right. Isn't that amazing? So you
I
go
mean,
from
she
living on the
raised
streets to
these
your
children
daughters.
up, and now one's in medical school.
One of the things, one of their art projects, the one that they sort of shared with us, they did self-portraits. That was so cool. It was really interesting to see them picture themselves.
And all of that, telling your life as a story, self-portraiture, and now this movie that it's going to be their narratives. All of that is therapy of reclaiming your life as a story, which is what our version here is Preacher from the Pew, right? And we had but it's actually really critical for all of us that you're able to tell your life as a story. What trauma does is disrupt that story, and it sticks out like a live wire and feels as though it doesn't fit or make any sense. And what therapy in any form does in time is allow you to have mastery over your own narrative, where it becomes your story to tell, not something that whatever your father or whatever oppressive power has harmed you. All of these are ways to reclaim your story as your own, and you can tell it on your terms.
And I will say Tori was a great translator for us also,
I could do the basic stuff.
which is what we needed.
Yeah, Carla and Mark were our primary translators. And then part of the work in the garden involved students from the University of Costa Rica coming in and completing service hours. And those kids were really solid in their English, and also did a great deal in translation for us. I was super impressed with what's going on at the University of Costa Rica. It was really great kids. So yeah, I know that others of us have commented that religion in Costa Rica and much of Latin America, about half of the population would say that they're Catholic, and another big chunk of that is going to be evangelical. So like, not really Presbyterian or Methodist or United Church of Christ or but Episcopalian, not kind of our mainstream, more moderate ways of believing. And so Mark and Carla and Mia and Carol and all of these people, they're the voice of this moderate way of believing. for a bunch of people that haven't really been exposed to that. Yeah. Anybody else want to comment or ask a question?
Thank you for going there.
Yes.
Your group did a lot. I learned a lot, that's for darn sure.
It was a trip for learning, and we feel,
Bringing
I think,
that
all of
back
us
to us.
very
You're
interested.
spreading it, that's what's so important.
Next week, we'll talk about what next. Right?
Yeah.
So we had great experiences, we tried to relay those to you. What does this have to do with all of us moving forward? So we can share some of
Can we
those.
stay connected with them?
That's the hope.
Dave?
Are you ready to tackle the more challenging countries of Central America? Costa Rica is an easy one.
It is,
Yeah.
isn't it? Yeah, it's very, my stepson,
Yeah,
Costa Rica's very safe.
When you think,
Real
when
entertaining.
we got there, I mean, one of the things we learned is their population is a little over 4 million people, 1 million refugees.
Right.
So if
Yeah.
you think about a country
More than most of them.
that Nicaragua, El Salvador.
Yeah,
But when you think 1/4 of their population is refugees, and not, and many of the refugees, they don't want to stay in Costa Rica. They want to go home. So it's very interesting. A lot of the people we dealt with, what their, feelings are. And not everybody feels the same way, obviously. But it's very interesting that that little country, 1/4 of its population is refugees.
right. Yeah, I'll point out here that Javier is from Nicaragua. He can't go back. He was on the wrong side in the most current conflict. Going back for him is not a choice. It's a pretty fraught country at this time. Although Jenny Dent grew up there, Mark and Jenny could never really consider the possibility of going to live in Nicaragua. It's just not safe right now.
Right. What we learned from this Javier, the minister's husband, is that in the past 5 years, 2 of his brothers have been killed in Nicaragua. Speaking out against this President Ortiz, who was unelected. What's his name?
Daniel Ortega.
Ortega, who's someone else was elected last year, but he refused to leave office. He said, "I'm reelected," and he's still in office. And for speaking out against that, his brothers were killed, and he said, "I cannot go back."
He's a Sandinista, if you remember that. It's just history.
Yeah, we got a whole lesson in that. Yeah, ministering to all sides in a conflict.
Well, the cool thing about UBL in particular is that because their reach is so much broader than Costa Rica, that's part of why it's so important.
Right.
You can't be gay and get a theological education in a lot of these other countries. It's not possible. So that's why it's so important to strengthen this place that is also fledgling. They too are, yes, they are the shining hope of Latin America in many ways, but all of that is fledgling as well. So I think it's actually critical that we strengthen the place where there is the possibility for inclusion and growth, so that these other countries actually have a chance. It's the East, right? It's the East that, a little bit of East that can spread through the whole world.
I believe the woman who works with the indigenous people, didn't she come from Bolivia, and she was not allowed to study theology because she was a woman, so she came to UBL.
That was Karen who taught us about the Pharaoh at the beginning.
Okay. From Bolivia, because she couldn't study theology as a woman.
Yeah, I mean, women are not priests in the Catholic Church. Southern Baptist Convention in this country does not invite women to be pastors. It's not a thing.
The vast majority of churches in this country don't allow women. We forget that because we're used to here, but like we are the little beast. We have memories of when we were the big dogs of the block. That's over. So now we get to play the role of being the small part of East that actually had a chance to affect the rest.
Yeah, Karen actually asked Carla, can I please do a Bible study? I really, really want to. So that's why we got Karen. Nobody had to ask her. She had some things she really wanted to say. Yeah. All right, we'll come back.